Hey everyone, I'm Steph and she's Kayla, and we are Margin Mavens. Today's episode is about Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas, and it will be the second installment in our Pride Month series. If you have not read the book and are planning on it, this is your warning that the following video will contain spoilers, but you can always come back to it once you've read the book. Now, on to the video. First and foremost, what are our thoughts and feelings?
It was holy shit. I read the synopsis, I understood the synopsis, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I was not emotionally prepared for the roller coaster that I had unwittingly agreed to be on by reading this book.
Yeah. Speak your truth. Solid. We're feeling really, really eloquent today, guys.
Yes.
Okay, so Cemetery Boys is by Aiden Thomas. And so Cemetery Boys is this author's debut. It came out in 2020. He has since then so basically in Cemetery Boys, we are following Yadriel. He is part of a Latinx family, right? Latinx, for those who are not aware, being the kind of umbrella term for Latin cultures, right? So they're not just from one specific culture or one specific Caribbean island. But he's a part of this family where they are part of what they would call the brujx, I think is how you pronounce it when I looked it up. And basically they have different responsibilities. The women are viewed more as the healers, right? The kind of like homemakers.
Caretakers.
Whereas the men are the ones who are kind of more in the field. They're the ones that try to help keep the balance between the living and the dead. If a spirit goes maligno, which means that they become a bad spirit, then they're the ones that step in to try to get rid of that spirit and make sure that they get to cross over peacefully. So Yadriel is a young boy, right? But the crux of his problem is the fact that he is trans. The tradition states that every member of this community, once they turn of age, they go through what they call a quince, right? Which is something that Latin cultures already have, but in the book it's a completely different meaning. That is where they get to talk to the deity that they worship, which is Lady Death, and she basically decides to give them powers and they fall into their roles within this community. Yadriel's family decided to postpone his indefinitely because he is trans, and he refused to go through that process to become a brujx because obviously he is a boy, and he's like, I want to go through the one for boys. So with a lot of the background and stuff like that, we end up seeing that he and his cousin Maritza decide that they're going to do the ceremony themselves, right? He's like, I can prove it to my family. I can prove it to the community. I am a boy. I am a brujo. I will do this, and Lady Death will love me and see me for as I am. They do the ceremony. He gets his portaje. Everything is good for like about a page.
Yep. It lasts about what, 2 pages maybe, if that.
So everything is good for about a page, and then they simultaneously feel a like terrible pain in their chest, right? And we find out as the audience that means that somebody in their community, one of the brujos or brujas, has died. Right? They are able to feel when their loved ones pass, but because of the nature of the feeling, they knew that it was not a normal passing. This guy did not just like die in his sleep.
Yes.
And so it kind of creates the mystery that is plaguing most of this book in what happened to Miguel. Why can't they find a body? Why did this happen?
Right.
We then meet Julian.
Oh, Julian.
And I
love you.
Love Julian. He reminds me of, I mean, I think literally they say it like in the book. Like he reminds me of like a puppy the entire time. Like this kid is just filled with energy. he handles the news pretty well. I don't think I would have handled it as well.
No.
So to backtrack a little bit for the audience, Yadriel and Maritza are doing a ceremony to basically summon a spirit, believing that it's going to be their cousin Miguel. And lo and behold, you have this like bad boy looking teenager show up.
Yeah, Julian shows up instead.
Julian shows up and he's like, "Why the heck do you guys have my necklace? That's mine. Give it back." And we find out that Julian had just been murdered a few hours prior.
Yes.
Right? And so he only recalls the fact that one of his friends was getting jumped and he steps in and he gets murked. So then for the entire book, we really have Yadriel and Maritza really trying to figure out what's going on from the side of the living, and then Julian's there with them.
Yes.
And through that, Yadriel and Julian get a lot closer, which I thought, like, obviously that was the route that it was going to take. You know, it wasn't surprising in any way. But the way that they did it, I think, was cool. Julian, immediately upon finding out that Yadriel was trans, like, wholeheartedly supported him. We find out that he has another friend named Flaca that is also trans. And so he is a very, like, strong ally to the point that he will, like, go out of his way to be like, you have nothing to prove to other people. You are who you are. And so that was really cool. Julian, we find out, is also kind of the glue between his friend group. Yeah, so he was the one that was trying to take care of them. He was the one that, like, he finds out he dies, right? This 15-year-old kid finds out he dies. And his first thought is like, oh my God, are my friends okay?
Yes.
And I think
that says, like, a lot about who he is.
Yeah, that says a lot about who he is. I think it would have been a lot easier for him to be like, oh my God, my life is over. You know, but he very quickly agrees, goes, okay, but what about my friends?
Right.
And I love him. I love him so much.
Him crossing out Yadriel's dead name
in the yearbook?
In his yearbook?
Yeah.
Oh, so good.
It was so sweet because he wasn't doing it.
Yeah, like, he wasn't being malicious.
Yeah, but he also wasn't doing it, like, for Yadriel to notice. Like, he specifically tries to hide it so that it wasn't something that, like, drew attention. He was just like, oh, this is the way that it should be because that's who you are. Right? He's not doing it because he's trying to get, like, brownie points with Yadriel. He's just like, oh, this is incorrect. That's not who they are.
Yeah. Correct. Yes.
No, we love Julian in this house.
The way he just supports Yadriel is
amazing. And I think he's a really good character to show, I guess, like, Latin culture and the fact that he's a troublemaker. He's aware of the fact that he hasn't always made it easy for the people around him, right? But he, despite the fact that he knows everybody around him is important to him and he does what they need and he's there for them unconditionally, he refuses to believe that they are there for him.
Yes.
And I think that that's really telling for the community as a whole, because I think within Latin communities, they are, like, the people will show you they love you by kind of, like, being hard on you all the time. And it's very easy to mistake that or take it as, like, oh, their lives would be a lot easier if I wasn't around because they're obviously complaining about me all the time.
Right.
But I think, like, with his brother, like, you very quickly see, like, oh, his brother, like, really cares about him. But both of them really suck at
addressing their feelings
and talking about their emotions. There's a really cool scene, I think, where Julian loses his temper for the first time and Yadriel basically tells him, like, I think it's actually his, like, inner monologue, but he's like, you know, I'm okay with him showing that he's upset, but the violence is not going to be something that we do here. That is not something that we are going to accept. And he calls out Julian, I think, very plainly and is like, yo, what's up with that machismo? And he's like, we're not doing that here, you know? And I think that that's also really cool because that's kind of like a generational trauma that that has to be broken. Like, it's a cycle that needs to be broken, and that it's cool to have feelings. It's good to share them. People should know how you're feeling, but that doesn't need to equate to some outburst of physical action.
Correct. And it was really cool to see that happen between two Latinos.
Yeah.
Because that's not usually a conversation that happens, I feel, between two men.
Definitely not. I think there's a lot that this book addresses that really hit home for me, especially like the conversations with his dad early on were really hard because you knew, or well, I guess like I knew as the reader that the dad loves him, right? It shows in his actions, it shows in the fact that he worries about him.
Right.
That he wasn't, anytime Yadriel wasn't where he was supposed to be, like the dad was obviously distracted trying to figure out where his kid was, but he would still slip up and misgender and do all these things, and there's no excuse for that. He should be working harder on it, and I like that he grew to that point.
Yes.
You know, I think it's a hard thing for an old-fashioned or older generation Latin father to go like, okay, I might have been wrong. Let's work past
that. Let alone like apologize.
Yeah, and like the scene where Yadriel finally like tells his dad about the portaje, and the dad is immediately like, oh God, I was wrong.
Yep.
Made me so emotional.
It was
because it didn't even take him like a minute to go
he didn't
like
argue.
Oh. Yeah, he was like,
he didn't dispute it. He was like, oh, I f***ed up.
Yeah, he was like, oh, death says you're good, and I was the one standing in the way of that.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's super, super telling, and I was emotional on that. I liked something that the author did in the fact that we never know Yadriel's dead name.
Yes.
Like, I like the fact that we're told, like, oh, so-and-so said it, or so-and-so has it written down.
Yeah.
But we, as the reader, will never know it because they will always just be Yadriel to us.
Because that's who they are.
Because that's who they are. And I think that that's really cool. Side note for all of the people listening. If you have a trans friend, a trans loved one, right? And you meet them and they have a name, don't ask them for the name that they had before then. You know, like that's not who they are. Correct. It doesn't matter.
They will tell you if they want to tell you.
Yeah. I liked the connection that we got between Julian and Yadriel.
Yes.
They kind of fall for each other in a very authentic way. And it's not pushed. It just kind of happens gradually. You start to see them kind of get closer to each other, learn who they are from like their own perspectives. One thing that I think made me super emotional in this was when Julian talked about why he didn't speak Spanish.
Yes, because that was something he only spoke with his dad.
Yeah, and Spanish. I think that, I mean, that's something that I can relate to in a sense, in the fact that I don't like go out of my way to speak Spanish outside of my home because it's something that I share with my family, and I'm not more comfortable speaking Spanish to them. If I speak Spanish outside, like in work or just in public settings, I notice that my Spanish is a lot choppier because I'm more aware of like any mistakes or any mispronunciations or missayings that I might do. Whereas my family are aware of like, like they're like, oh, she's getting the point across.
Yeah. That's all they really care about. Like, they don't care if you're perfect. It's the outside world that cares if your Spanish is perfect.
In Cemetery Boys, right, we get the crux of the problem is that people are being taken, right? They're being murdered. We can't find their bodies. Something is going on. Did you see it coming? Did you see the big bad coming?
I didn't see it coming till like 2 pages before. Like it was like a few pages before, and I was like, okay, well, like everything's good except for the fact that like everything's not good because we still have this subplot of like people disappearing and like what the fuck happened to Julian. And then I was like, oh, I bet it's so and so. And then when it happened, I was like, no, I want it to be wrong. I want it to be wrong so bad.
Yeah, I think I knew pretty early on, specifically because of the scene where Lita is telling them at the beginning, like, the claw of the jaguar is missing.
Mm-hmm.
Yadriel makes a point of explaining, like, what the claw of the jaguar is for. And he says, like, oh, it was when human sacrifices were made and the human would be, like, stabbed through the chest. And I
Mm-hmm.
specifically remembered highlighting it and being like, yo, wasn't the pain that we felt with Miguel in the chest?
Oh, I didn't even
And
notice that.
then Julian, when they first meet him, he like specifically keeps rubbing his chest. And they were like, and it like mentions that or whatever. And then obviously by the time Julian starts having those weird like symptoms and stuff, it's always
Yeah.
his chest that was bleeding. And so I was like, oh man, like it had to have been related to that.
My
And
ass was too
then,
focused on the romance.
yeah, I
Not at all.
immediately picked up on it because I was like, oh, those ceremonies and everything that were happening was in order to get like more power. I was like, so
Yeah.
who in this community would want more
More
power?
power.
And I immediately was like, oh gosh, we haven't seen
Yeah.
this character in a couple pages.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
And I think like this character, so for those once again, last second chance, if you're still listening but you plan on reading it, you do not want to be spoiled. Stop here. Do not continue. Okay. The uncle, I
Mm-hmm.
think, was incredibly smart because I think the conversation that Yadriel heard him and the father talking about had nothing to do with Yadriel.
No,
I
it had to do
think
with the
it had
claw.
it had to do with the claw. It had to do with the fact that the family was losing the generational power. Right? He's saying
Yes.
like as time goes on, we're getting more and more like diluted from the original source.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was trying to talk the father into
Using
bringing
the claw.
back these sacrifices in order to give them
Yeah.
more power. Right? But with
Right.
Yadriel there, he knew that he had a really good opportunity to make it seem as though he was fighting for him,
Yes. To
hoping,
get him on his
yeah,
side.
hoping that when the time came, Yadriel would be like, yeah, I'm down for this. The only thing he wasn't expecting in that exchange was the fact that Yadriel had already become a brujo. So he's like, I'm chilling.
Yeah.
So I think that was really telling. Some of my favorite scenes, right, are
Mm-hmm.
the ending scenes, the painful ones.
Those are the best
Um,
ones.
those are the best
Getting,
ones. I
getting
think.
Julian's point of view was so great.
Oh, it was so good because he feels things so much
Yes.
more passionately than
Yes.
Yadriel. Like every single line, every single sentence that he gave us, you can like it's very like poignant. You can feel how he feels towards Yadriel.
Yes.
I was actually just explaining this last night when I was gushing about the book and stuff like that. The fact that he goes very like feral when
Yes.
Yadriel is like vulnerable and unconscious and he's like
Yes.
nobody touch him, and then his dad is obviously confused as to who this guy is, and
Yes.
he's like, oh, are you a friend of Yadriel? And he goes, mi querido. And I like
Ah, that got
died.
me. I
I like,
yelled.
yeah, I died because I was like, oh my goodness, like they haven't even had this conversation, but it's just like he knows,
Yeah.
you know.
He
And
was
he,
already all in.
yeah, he was like, no, I can't let you touch this kid, like I need to
I
fix
need to
this.
protect him.
Yeah, I just that was so good. And the fact that like the family
Just accepted it.
accepted it and took him in meant a lot because I think Latin families will say like, yes, we accept you and we love you for who you are, but it's a whole other business when you actually bring evidence
That
of it.
person home. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
completely different business. I liked that Yadriel was able to go through his ceremony. He was able to have his mom there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything was super sweet. I think that Aiden Thomas could get away with making this into a series.
Oh, my dream. That would be my dream. I don't think it'll happen, but that would be my dream.
Yeah, I think that there could be a lot there in terms of like Yadriel bringing in his unique perspective
Right.
into their community
To the
and kind of
family.
like
Yeah.
helping them shift forward. I think that would be really cool. Lady Death kind of scares me.
Oh, she was kind of dope. I liked her.
Yeah, like I love her. But being somebody that grew up, I guess, with the superstitions and the stories and the depictions and like stories from like deep in Mexico and all of these things, I respect and fear all of those things. And so when she like comes to Yadriel, that was a moment where I was like, oh goodness, this is kind of scary. Maritza's reaction to her,
oh my god,
was so
Maritza
good.
was cracking me up.
Yeah, I think
Just being so mad, and then she just like doesn't even think or question. She just jumps right in to help and save Yadriel.
Yeah, and she's like, I can't let Yadriel die like this.
Yeah.
And I think like Maritza also does a really convincing thing of, I think a lot of people, not just Latin communities, but a lot of people, when they have that moment of like, if you exist and you have this power, how could you let this thing happen? And then she kind of creates her own power from it. She's like, okay, yes, I still believe in you because I've, now physically come face to face with you. I still have these powers you've given me. But if you will not step in, I will. And she kind of takes her power back. And I really liked that.
I loved it.
And we love Maritza a lot. Yeah, I like their relationship a lot. Great book. 5 out of 5.
Oh, 5 out of 5.
I
100%.
finished it in like a few hours. I like would not put it down.
Once you get to a certain part, it becomes impossible.
I mean, I was on a deadline, right? But like, I was also like, no, I need to finish this book.
I need to know what happens.
Yeah, 100%.
I need the happy ending.
I need between that ending.
Between that and Most Ardently, I was like, wow, like just absolutely rip my heart out.
Yeah,
stomp on it.
But
put it back in my chest.
Yeah, I mean, what this is showing me is that, like, I mean, and I already knew this, but I'm, like, almost embarrassed to say that I don't read a lot of, like, Latin authors. And I now desperately want to change that. Because it was something really, like, warm and comforting to see, like, parts of my own culture on the page in front of me. And almost being like, oh, my family's not, like, we don't really do, like, Dia de los Muertos or anything like that. And almost being like, man, like, I kind of want to now. Like, this is kind of beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I think I have no complaints other than the fact that it was short.
Yeah. I would love to see more. I don't know if we'll get it, but I would love to see.
It's okay. We'll just read the rest of his books.
Yeah. That's what fan fiction is for.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to our 4th episode of Margin Mavens, where we talked about Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. Since it is Pride Month, we will be highlighting more LGBTQIA+ stories over the course of the month. Stay tuned and stay gay, and if no one has told you this today, you are loved and you matter.